Oh, thank you, Jay. It is always such a great blessing to have him with us. Thank you for being in. Of course, thank you, Bob, too, for pulling it together. Speaking of Bob, I got to just tell you, we can trust the universe, the intelligence of the universe. We just think we're figuring things out and making plans. This morning, and in fact, all week long, I had another song in mind that I thought we had emailed and agreed on for Jay to open with. And I got here this morning, and he was doing everything new. And I said, well, that wasn't the one I had in mind, but it'll work. And, of course, Bob was right. He emailed that, but it had blown right by me. But the beautiful part of it is it works so much better than the one I had in mind. Hello. So that's kind of a theme was what I've been talking about this morning, and you hear it here all the time in some way, that there's always something greater, guiding, informing, supporting us if we surrender control and, well, not all the control. Do you mind? Just a little. Surrender control and open to the power of the one that you heard us in the song and in the prayer, all of that. That's where the richness of life is. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, everyone, for listening to Spirit and ignoring me. That probably should happen more often around here. And, there's a theme here. And we sang, I Release, our opening song, I Let Go, I let the Spirit run my life. And then Jay's singing about Bring It On, everything new. And it's all about change, isn't it? I release, but I'm open to new. Change, open to new. And, there's not many things you can really, really count on in life. But what they say, the one constant in life is change. And it being September and the autumn leaves showing out there, we're going to go with the theme of fall. And for this month, it always makes me think about change, because somewhere in the world there are seasons changing. So that's not quite here, but we Floridians know, we can tell those subtle changes. So the theme this month is about change. And, we can say, okay, that's a lovely idea to realize. Yeah, everything must change. Everything does change. And the only constant in life is change. But when it happens to us, we're not quite so enamored with that idea, are we? Especially when it's change that we didn't initiate. But what I'm talking about today is really change. It's all kind of the same dynamic. Whether it's something we initiated or something that blindsided us, whether it's something we're welcoming or something we are dreading. The agony and the ecstasy of change. Every time there's any change, pay attention, there's a little bit of both. There's a little bit of both. So why talk about this today? Because I know you all kind of know this, but it's a reminder again, because the fundamental message that we teach here, that we share, and then I would guess is maybe behind the reason why you come here, is that it is the Creator's intention for its creation, us, that we live with vitality, with fulfillment, continually discovering and expressing our never-ending potential. And we tend to forget that in the busyness of life and the stuff, the tumult that can be going on. But that is the underlying overall message that we're sharing with you all the time. And I think behind any other reason you might come back is that. You're always, I am too, looking to how can I express my life in even more fulfilling, greater ways that are in line with what Spirit created me to express. But one of the ways we get in the way of this beautiful process and intention of life of God for us is when we resist change. We resist change. And the reason we resist change, I think, is because we don't recognize it for what it is. It is life's creative process nudging us forward to grow. So I was just thinking, why don't we, instead of using the word change, call it creativity? Because I love the word creativity. It holds a lot of promise. It holds a lot of life. We might cringe sometimes when we hear the word change, but I don't think we ever cringe when we hear, I'm opening to creativity. So let's just maybe do a little rewiring in our heads about change and take some of that energy of, I don't want change. And I'm speaking to myself too, because I kind of like constancy and consistency. Dr. Roger Teal, who was the senior minister of the beautiful Mile High Center for Spiritual Living in Denver, he is now retired. He wrote a book that talks about this, and in it he had a line that I just love. He said, change is the mask that transformation wears. Change is the mask, disguise, we could say, that transformation wears. It's not something that's meant to work your last good nerve, although I think that's where we would likely go first. But how about if every time there's a big change to say, whoopee, I'm being transformed one more time. Well, it's a practice. It's a practice. So today, actually, in talking about change, the aspect I want to talk about with you, I decided I'm going to call it slow dancing with change. Now, slow dancing is kind of nice and delicious, and isn't it sweet? I mean, it's, slow. It doesn't matter if you know the steps even, but slow dancing has just a wonderful sense to it. And generally, it's not a situation where you're hoping, the song starts and then you're hoping until the dance ends. You're kind of in it. You're enjoying the process. You're going to slow dance. So, one of the modern-day mystics, Teilhard de Chardin, wrote something beautiful about this. So, from picturing yourself on the Starlight Ballroom dancing floor, slow dancing, let's go to the spiritual level here. But here's what he wrote. I just love it. And it's about our evolving and our changing. He said, trust in the slow work of God. And remember, God can be whatever name you want to call that beautiful, infinite process. And he goes on to say, we're quite naturally impatient to reach the end without delay. We should like to skip the intermediate stages. And we're impatient, being on the way to something unknown, something new, and yet it is the law of all progress that it is made by passing through some stages of instability. And that may take a very long time. Now, we might be able to acknowledge and give him, okay, I hear you, instability a little while, okay, I can do it, but a long time, I'm not so sure. Well, that's where the slow dancing comes in. Can't push it. So I'm going to take a side step from his writing for just a moment, and let's think about what changes we might be going through in our lives. It could be big ones like change your home, your geography, your relationships, careers, maybe changing your physical routine. Maybe you have to, or maybe it's because you've intended to. You're gonna make some changes that are going to benefit you. Changing health issues. Again, as I said earlier, it could be change that we initiate or change that is foisted on us by life. It could even be small changes. So you may be sitting there saying, well, I pretty much got my career, my home, my relationship, that's pretty much in place. But then consider every day how many changes you are hit with. How many, another way to put it, unmet expectations. You thought an appointment was going to work out. You thought someone was going to show up. You thought you were going to be able to find something. You thought you were going to get more done than you thought. All of that's change too. Unmet expectations of the day. So wherever you are in the change continuum, all of this, take to heart because it applies. So Chardin continues and he says, he relates it to changing your ideas as well and your perspectives. I think most of us here are people who are curious and questioning and examining. Yeah, there are certain things we say, yeah, that's my belief. That one I'm pretty sure of. But to be really alive and dynamic mentally, we need to be questioning and exploring and all of that so all the time. So what happens then, of course, is we may come up against and say, oh, well, I believed that, but now I'm getting information or insights or experiences that say, I don't know. That's change. And sometimes that's the most upsetting change, to start changing our way of thinking, our beliefs, our assumptions about life. And so what he says is, let your ideas, in other words, you're changing somehow your mental perspective, let those ideas mature gradually. Let them grow and shape themselves without undue haste. Don't try to force them. You know, in the Eastern philosophies, there's that reminder to be in the I don't know mind. I think he's referring to that. So part of being in change in the healthiest way and really creativity is to be willing to be in that, I don't know, but it's okay because I'm in a process. So whether it's in your physical life or in your mental and emotional and psychological, wherever it is, there's always a place for that in between. Now, he finished that up by saying, when you're in these times of change, accept the anxiety of feeling yourself to be in suspense and incomplete. You know that feeling? Come on, in suspense. I mean, if I'm, is it going to work out? Is it going to happen? Are they going to do it? That space he's talking about. And he says, don't rush it. Accept that. That's part of that process. And then he wraps it up. And he's saying it more in his traditional, conventional religious terms, but here's how he puts it. Give our Lord the benefit of trusting that it is leading you. And what we would say is, give spirit, give life, give infinite intelligence, the benefit of trusting that it is leading you, because it is. That's what makes all of this possible, is knowing that there's something greater always guiding us. Raymond Charles Barker, one of our Science of Mind teachers and ministers, he had such a succinct way of putting things, and this is how he summed up what Desjardins what the long piece that I shared. He said, "You are a temporary form, forever at home in a permanent principle. You are a temporary form, forever at home in a permanent principle." Or let's just tease it apart a little and say, you are a temporary, that would be a changing, a creative form, forever at home in a permanent principle, forever at home in the one, in God. And you are safe. And you are safe. So there are 3 phases in the process of change. Now, I would guess most of us think there are only 2. But there are beginnings and there are endings, of course. And by the way, when I say process of change, all of life is a process. It's always in process. Just let's remind ourselves of that nothing just ends. Every ending immediately and sometimes overlaps with a beginning, and every beginning initiates a potential end, and it's a process always going on. Life is a process, not a product or a project. And so when we are aware of that, it makes it a little easier too to say, okay, this too shall pass. This is change. This is creativity. This is how life is. So the 3 phases of change are, of course, beginning and ending. And then between them is that neutral zone, which usually doesn't feel neutral at all. And in fact, a lot of times we don't even pay attention to it. It's kind of like an empty feeling where we feel sometimes out of control or lost, or maybe even like we're a little crazy. Someone put it this way. Have you ever been here? sitting exactly in the place between where it's completely still and where everything else is falling apart. And life keeps nudging me, whispering, "Isn't it perfect?" And I'm trying to be polite, but I'm not sure I see it yet. In that little place in between where everything is still and then everything's falling apart, and life keeps nudging us and reminding us, "Isn't it lovely? Isn't it perfect?" And I'm trying to be polite. Well, I'm not sure if I see it that way yet. How are we doing with Dorian as a for instance, with this hurricane business that's been going on? What a great opportunity for us to see how am I doing with uncertainty, with change? Am I it doesn't mean just blissfully go along. Well, maybe you could blissfully go along and be totally unfazed, but I'm inviting you to say this is a great opportunity to test our spiritual muscle, to see how we're going within and trusting the only thing we really can trust. God, the big one, the infinite, no matter what is going on, no matter what happens. And this is not at all to minimize the disastrous consequences of these storms and what appears to be on the horizon. And we are blessed that right now it's not quite in our horizon, but it was for a while. So it's an opportunity again to say, change. I thought I had all my plans. I didn't think I'd be also having to get ready for a hurricane. I didn't think I'd also have to be planning for, like, well, what will I do if I have to evacuate? You know the drill. All of this gives an opportunity again to say, isn't it perfect? Life is saying, isn't it perfect? So when we're in the midst of change, in that in-between place, I love a book that Sister Joan Chittister wrote called Between the Dark and the Daylight. And she talks about this space. She said, when we're in that space in between what was and what is going to be, we feel untethered and we feel unprepared, sometimes stranded in smothering nothingness, kind of lose our bearings, our orientation, our internal compass sometimes seems useless. Where did that feeling of self-confidence disappear to? Where am I going? Who am I? When will this be over? She said, and in this space is not a place or a call for the discovery of data. In other words, she's saying in this in-between place of between what was and what is going to be, because it will, is not a place to be demanding answers, data, or information. It's a call for the contemplation of possibilities. It's a call for the contemplation of possibility. Wow. Try that. And that can be on a material level, material possibilities, or going to the infinite possibilities, the God qualities. God is always love and peace and strength and guidance and wholeness. Go there. That's the invitation when we're in that in-between, uncertain, I don't know how it's going to turn out place. That's what we do with affirmative prayer here, by the way. When our practitioners and I do affirmative prayer, we are always putting our attention on your possibilities. That's where we go. Another writer named Barbara DeAngelis said it this way. She said, the moment between where you once were, what you once were, and who you are now becoming is where the dance of life really takes place. Sometimes when you're in the middle of it, it doesn't feel like a dance. But she said that's where the real dance of life takes place, because it is in that neutral zone, that neutral phase of transition, that interim spaciousness, that all possibilities and all creativity and innovative ideas can come to life and flourish. Because we don't know. Therefore, there's a possibility of all kinds of things. Almost anything can happen. Anything can come to mind. So it's not so much that we're afraid of change, but it's that place in between where there's nothing to hold on to. It's like flying between two swinging trapeze bars, flying between the trapezes. There's a man named Denon Perry who actually was not a religious person. He was a scientist, and then he became a real advocate for peace initiatives, getting together, for example, children from conflicting countries to play together, to write poems together, to there were so many ways that was his commitment. And he passed away a number of years ago. But I found this that he wrote, and it's a parable. Remember what a parable, Jesus used to use those things. He'd say, you're not getting it, so here's a story. Well, I know you're getting it. But this is his parable of a trapeze. And I've loved it for years, and I can relate to it. So see if you can. And here's what he says. Sometimes I feel like my life is a series of trapeze swings. I'm either hanging on to a trapeze bar, swinging along for a few moments in life, or for a few moments in my life, I'm hurtling across space in between those trapeze bars. Most of the time, I spend my life hanging on for dear life to my trapeze bar of the moment. Could be career, relationship, could be where you live, a way of doing something, a belief, a perspective, as I said earlier. But he says it carries me along at a certain steady rate of swing, and I have the feeling that I'm in control of my life. But every once in a while, as I'm merrily or even not so merrily swinging along, I look ahead of me into the distance, and what do I see? I see another trapeze bar swinging toward me. It's empty, and I know in that place in me that knows that this new trapeze bar has my name on it. It is my next step, my growth, my aliveness coming to get me. Now, in my heart of hearts, I know that for me to grow, I must release my grip on the present, well-known bar and move to this new one. Each time it happens to me, I hope, he says, I pray, that I won't have to let go of my old bar completely before I grab the new one. 1 foot on the dock, 1 foot in the boat. But in my knowing place, he says, I know that I must totally release my grasp on my old bar, and for some moment in time, I must hurtle across space before I can grab onto that new bar. Each time I'm filled with terror. It doesn't matter that in all my previous times of hurtling across the void, of unknowing, I've always made it. And haven't you? Look back. Sometimes when you're feeling really on the edge, start making a list of the times when, I didn't think I'd make it, and I did. He says, I am each time afraid that I will miss, that I will be crushed on unseen rocks in the bottomless chasm between the trapeze bars. But I do it anyway. No guarantees, no net, no insurance policy. But you do it anyway because somehow to keep hanging on to that old bar is no longer on the list of alternatives. So for an eternity that can last maybe only a microsecond or 1,000 lifetimes, I soar across the dark void of the past is gone and the future is not yet here. I call it, he said, transition. I have come to believe that this transition is the only place where real change occurs. I've noticed that in our culture, this transition zone is looked upon as a no thing, a no place between places. And by the way, Brene Brown cautions us. She said, when we're faced with uncertainty, have you noticed, we are hardwired to make up a story. We just can't stand to be in between. And so we're almost hardwired to make up a story. So he goes on to say, but that void between those trapeze bars, is that just scary, confusing, and disorienting? A nowhere that must be gotten through as fast and as unconsciously as possible? We do that, don't we? I'm losing something, I'm changing something is different, and I got to figure out what the next thing is right now and get there. And he says, but no, what a wasted opportunity that would be. He said, I have a sneaking suspicion that the transition zone is the only real thing. The only real thing. And the bars are illusions that we dream up to avoid that void where real change and real growth occurs for us. So he says, whether or not my hunch is true, it remains that the transition zones in our lives are incredibly rich places. With all that pain and fear and the feelings of being out of control that can accompany those transitions, yes. And yet they are incredibly rich places. They're the most alive, he says, and the most growth-filled, passionate, expansive moments in our lives if we will allow them to be that. If we will, and I will insert here, if we will allow ourselves to let go of control and release to real power, the power of that never-changing principle that supports us in all of our changes. He said these spaces between the bars, they should be honored and even savored, giving ourselves permission to actually hang out in the transition between the trapezes, the only place where change really occurs. In that vast spaciousness, I would say pay attention to nudges, it's a subtle place. Pay attention to the subtleties, the coincidences, synchronicities, new ideas. Try new things, but not with the intent to get this over with as quickly as possible, but to realize you're in a space that's just juicy with possibility, and it's not been predicted or programmed or laid out. Give yourself time to be in that space and be restfully attentive. It shouldn't be a struggle time, a time to really sit back, say, and sometimes for me, actually, the thing that gets me there is when it's totally something that I totally cannot figure out or control, and I just kind of have to say, almost like, all right, you do it. Oh, I surrender. And when I do, wow, it's amazing. I'm in that place. And I don't fall apart. Instead, something takes care of me inside. I invite you to really be aware of that and love it and play with it if you're there or when you encounter, because we all will. Time and time again in our lives will be in that in-between place and change. So it can be terrifying, he says, to wrap up his parable. He says it can also be enlightening in the true sense of the word, because hurtling through that void, we just might learn how to fly. Might just learn how to fly. And so I want to leave you with that. I want you to know that you are safe as you slow dance with change, because you're a changing, creative form forever at home in a permanent principle, God, by whatever name you want to call it, the changeless, that created you to be always unfolding in infinite change. And when you know that, and even if you're not always aware of it, remember, all is well. Namaste. Okay. Thank you.